So I'm really excited to have you here and to kind of nerd out on all things. My very first question, though, in the midst of like reading your bio and following you, I'm just like, okay, so do you know what your human design type is?
No, I tried to look it up so many times, and I think for whatever reason I get to the paywalls, and I'm like, I'm not gonna get into it. So somebody needs to tell me how to get it or give me a link, and I would be happy to follow up with you on that.
I
I
will
should
hook you
know.
up. I will hook you up because I'm like, this girl has got to be a manifesting generator, either that or a projector. Like your
Yeah.
energy is very you've got so many different interests, and of course they're all kind of underneath the same umbrella, like they really work together beautifully,
Mm,
but it just feels like you continue learning and expanding and growing, and it feels MG to me in a lot of ways.
gotcha.
So
Yeah.
I'll hook you up and then you can let me know.
Absolutely. I feel like I looked it up once and it just didn't resonate at the time, but that was like years ago, and maybe I would just like wasn't seeing the full picture, but I can't even remember what it was.
That's fair. That's fair. Sometimes folks, they like look up what their type is and they're just kind of like, no way.
Yeah.
This is not, this doesn't really align with me. And that can have to do with like their gates or their channels or something of that nature.
Uh,
So, I mean, honestly, sometimes I am a manifesting generator. I don't feel like I'm a manifesting generator. I feel like
gotcha. Okay.
I'm, more of a manifestor, more of a projector, or it just kind of depends what I'm doing.
Mm.
But I'm really excited to not only have you on the podcast, but just get an opportunity to kind of like go through your mind a little bit.
Let's do it.
Yes. So first and foremost, Miss Lauryn, I would love for you to just kind of share a little bit about your background with everyone and kind of like what was it that brought you into psychic work to begin with?
Yeah, so background, short version, because there's definitely multiple long versions, but shorter version is that like I always say like I wasn't super psychic like growing up. I wasn't, you know, family members didn't have this, like I wasn't like hit by lightning or had like an out of body experience or anything like that. I'm just normal person going about their life, and I had three family members that like passed. All really close together. And I was just trying to make sense of things and figure things out. And I kind of was looking into psychics. And at the same time, I was going to film school. And so I'm actually like a filmmaker first, video producer first. And I had a class where we had to make a documentary. And I was like, well, I'm just going to use this class to research psychics. And so I started to make a documentary about psychics and reached out to a bunch locally here in Colorado to film them, and found a program that taught psychic development. And I always joke that like I tried to get in with the teacher and was like, hey, can you let me film? And she was like, I don't know who you are. This is weird. Like, come take a class first. And so I took a class, and like literally the rest is history, because I sat in that class, realized that everyone is psychic, everyone can do this, including me. And so the documentary just kind of got left behind, and then my psychic journey started. And I'm actually approaching my 10-year anniversary from graduating from that program. I also coached at it for a while, here in December. So that's kind of short version.
That's very cool. I didn't
Yeah.
know that at all. So in regards to like, obviously you've got a really nice community on YouTube in regards to your videos. Is that where you get to kind of like flex those skills?
Yes, yeah. Because I think I started my channel when I was still actually I wasn't in school, but I was out of film school, and I was just like, I'm just gonna upload this for funsies. And then over the years I just got more and more serious about it. And so that's kind of like where my filmmaking background has really coincided with my psychic background, and I've just kind of naturally created this like channel over time. And I think a lot of people just have resonated with it because there just wasn't a lot of like psychic development information online out there. So at the time, so
Yeah. When did you start your channel?
2017. So
Wow. Yeah,
yeah.
that's definitely like way before it was really starting to hit the mainstream.
Yeah, correct. I would say. I think I remember trying to search, certain things that I'd learned in my classes couldn't find anything online. And I was like, well, maybe I'll just make a video. And don't look back at those videos. They're awful, but they're very old. But
I have I started doing my Wednesday wisdom videos, and those were back in oh my gosh, I think it was like 2013
oh,
or
wow.
something. And I was just with a friend. We were kind of chatting about it. And so I went back to look at a couple of those videos, and it was just like, oh my gosh, who is that little girl? She was so scared because I literally was like, I remember the first video I was holding on to the kitchen counter where I was standing just so that I wouldn't run away because it was like I knew I needed to start doing video, but I was
Yeah.
petrified of being on video.
I know exactly what you mean. I feel like persona me back then is so different. That's actually why I'm re-recording like one of my first courses is because I can't stand old version of me.
Yeah. Well,
It's
it's
very
just,
relatable.
I don't know if you view it this way, but I know that like in the very beginning when I started having my podcast, which was back in 2020, to now, like, I mean, I can't handle going back and listening to those episodes or listening to me speak. And I think it's just because like I pick up on things so much when they're not in full alignment. And it was just
Yeah,
that like I feel like I feel into the energy of me not being fully myself, comfortable with
100%.
myself, right? So it's like,
Yeah,
oh, I feel that discomfort of who I was at that point in time, not being fully
exactly.
genuine. Is it the same
Yeah.
for you?
Yes. And I mean, they always say that in film too. Like, if you look at your past videos and cringe, it's because you're improving. And, a silver lining of this is like, hey, you're improving and you can see where you need to get better. And, I think that says something.
That's perfect. That's good to hear. I didn't know that either, but we'll take it. It definitely feels like it's been such an evolution, and I can't imagine if it had been translated to being on video, for that long, in regards to being able to show up as yourself and probably also just kind of because you're getting to know yourself as well, how you speak, how you share, how you communicate. Like
Exactly.
it's such an involved process.
Mhm.
I'm so obsessed with podcasting. I like to say if I was a multimillionaire, I would still be doing this just on a different level.
Yeah.
Um, so psychic work, going to school, I'm really curious about what it was like because you went to the Aspen program for psychic development and you got
Yes.
certifications in psychic studies, mediumship, and medical intuition, which,
Yeah.
yo, I'm just because this is in Colorado, right?
It was. It's not around anymore, unfortunately. But yes, it was.
Wow, that's too bad.
Yeah.
Because I literally was just like, okay, I need to look into this program. So what was it like
Yeah.
going to school
I
and
know.
studying these modalities?
It was so I'm like now looking back, I did not realize how lucky I was. And the person that created this, her name was Karen Fox. She's my mentor, is what I call her. And I actually had her on my podcast recently to talk about it. Like why, how did she come up with this idea? And essentially, she had a background, she has a PhD, she taught in schools. So her approach was very academic. She understood how people learned. So she
Mm,
created classes and a whole entire, like, I think I still have like the paper of like how all the classes fit into each other and how you get certified. And it was like school where you'd go for 2 hours pretty much every weekend of my 2014. Every weekend I was going and it was just in a building. It was in the tech center, which is a very like businessy, very not woo-woo center of Colorado. And we would just go in and do classes for like 2 hours. And it'd be like a group of don't know, maybe like 15, 20, 30 women. Sometimes men were in those groups. Sometimes kids would join as well, which was cool. And we would just like do whatever that day's, thing was, whether it was like dream work or meditation. With medical intuition, I had to have like a whole class on anatomy. And they had a professional come in and teach about that. So basically it was just a bunch of different classes. And then we had outside homework too. Like I had to read people. I had had to read an entire gallery of people, like 30 people in front of us as a class, and we got to pick up messages for everybody. I had to do like 30-minute, 1 hour readings, record them, send them to my teacher. She would evaluate us. There was homework, like it was like school. And I love that because I'm a Virgo rising, and I'm just like, yes, give me the homework, give me all the things. And so it was very academic. We even had like a graduation ceremony at a local library. But it was just, it felt normal. And now looking back, I'm so grateful for that opportunity because I haven't seen anything else like it. And I always talk about it, and then I always disappoint people because it doesn't exist anymore. And you'll end up finding out why. But my coach basically had to move back to take care of her family, her sick family. But yeah, it's a bummer, but I'm so grateful to have learned from it.
Yeah, there aren't that many programs like here in the United States. The majority of people, especially psychics who've done a lot of training, it's like in the UK, I feel like is where a lot of
Yeah.
them go.
Mm.
Um, and so I was just so excited to be able to chat with you about that. But what were some of the things that really surprised you, especially in the early days of learning, about your psychic senses? Because it seems like, I mean, in my life, I always knew that I was very psychic. I always knew that like my intuition was really strong. But when I came to the Akashic Records, I was the CEO of a marketing agency. I wasn't Reiki certified yet or any of those
Yeah.
things. I didn't have a lot of context for that. And so being able to start utilizing my gifts through the Akasha and through that metaphysical lens was a completely brand new experience for me.
Yeah.
And I did trainings up front as well. And quite frankly, they weren't super helpful, but
Mm.
I'm just curious about like what that was like for you to start kind of opening up and feeling in.
Yeah, it was crazy to me because again, I wasn't really going into this to learn. I was just going into it to film. And so I was sitting down and like I think what like my overall first impression was, whoa, this is so much easier and natural than I thought it was going to be. Like I thought it was these people that knew how to do this. I thought it was a gift. I didn't know this is, oh, that little gut feeling that I've always had. Oh, that dream that I had, that little piece of psychic information that I may not have realized was psychic at the time. Like, oh, that's what that is. It's all connecting. And ultimately, like I would sit down and, the coach would say something like, okay, try to tune into this person's, like when I was doing mediumship, try to tune into like one of their family members. And I'm like, I am just pulling shit out of my ass. I don't think anything is coming through. Like, I'm just gonna say this. And then I would talk, and then the person is in tears, and I'm apparently connecting. And I'm just like, how? What? And even to this day, sometimes I still have that reaction. And then the same goes the other way. Lots of other students were able to pick up on things that I knew they knew nothing about. And it was just lots of moments like that that was just like so eye-opening and ultimately just what got me hooked and never stopped, from there.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to ask you, what do you think your favorite aspect of it was? Like what really hooked you in?
You know, I probably wouldn't have said this then because I didn't understand, but I think it was the community. It was being in a room with a bunch of other women that were all going through spiritual awakenings and being able to have that one-on-one real-time connection. It's just you don't see it too much, especially like on a frequent basis where I was getting to see these women like literally every weekend. Um, so, outside of the community, I think I just loved, gosh, I loved all of it, honestly. I soak up all the information. Like I also took Reiki under the program, and then I went on to, do animal communication. So it's literally just anything under the sun I will like consume just because I'm so fascinated by how it works, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can't underestimate coming together in circle in that way. Like it's such a powerful experience, when
Mhm.
people are not only together, but then they're together for that sort of a purpose, in
Yeah.
regards to like working with their intuition and being open to those things, all from a very intentional space. It's extremely powerful.
Yeah.
I can definitely imagine that would be a huge impetus to, drawing me in as well.
Hmm.
Um, so in regards to like sort of how it happens, like what is kind of your take on our connection to our psychic senses?
On how our psychic senses work or how it happens. That's like the ultimate question. It's like, how does this work? I know that it does, and like I've been trying to explore this and answer this question for years. But I think that, short version, everything is energy, and we are energy. We're all part of this energy, so we can tune in and tap into it. I think analogies tend to work like really well to communicate this, and my coach always talked about like the aspen trees, right? So aspen trees up above ground, they're seemingly separate. They're all over the place. They miles and miles away, you can have an aspen tree. And then over here, there's even more. But underground, the system, like the roots are actually connected. And it's not one, tree here and there. It's actually, or sorry, not a bunch of several trees that are individual. It's all one big system. And so it's kind of like, I love that analogy when it comes to like energy and intuition. It's that we're tapping into that root system. We're tapping into each other, into that universal energy. Again, I feel like there's so many different explanations of how exactly that works, but I'm still exploring that. And ultimately, I think, thinking of it in that sense, I feel like all of us can sort of relate to that and be like, okay, yeah, I could see how that would work. And so I feel like that's how it works. I don't know. I don't know. I hesitate to go into that realm because I feel like that's where I'm like, how do I hold water?
No, exactly. I mean, I don't know that there is like an answer, quite
Yeah.
frankly, at least maybe an answer that fully makes sense with both our logical and our spiritual senses. I think
Yeah.
that I love asking other practitioners what they
Yeah.
think, like how they perceive it, because there are so many different ways in which you can perceive it, and perfect. So we'll just jump in right around 33. Okay. So when it comes to your approach to working psychically, like how do you like to approach psychic work?
I like to do it very methodically. Like I try to do the same ish thing every time. Like I have a set kind of like how do I get into the reading and how do I come out of the reading? And a lot of that is to like protect myself. A lot of that is to set the intention and make sure I'm talking to the right spirit, asking the right questions. I've just found that when I get into a routine, it's a lot easier. Now, that's not always the case. That's like when I read other people. Um, Otherwise, like day to day, I kind of always have it on very like low, like turn the volume down a little bit, but it's always on so my guides can talk to me. But for the most part, when I do readings, I try to just kind of like do this three-step process in, do it on my way out, kind of keep it very like rigid because I read so many people that if I don't do that, I just got stuff around me all the time. It can just be like overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also a lover of like um process,
Hmm.
for lack of a better word. The word is not coming to me, but I definitely like to just make sure my bases are hit and have things kind of in place. I mean, energetically, I'm definitely much more safe in that place, I believe,
Yeah,
because there is so much that can move in between people. And, I think that this is, regardless of what profession people are in, I think that this is really important. If you're a therapist, if you are a hairstylist, if you are an accountant, if you're working with people, you're pulling in energy, you're taking on things, you know what I mean? And
yeah,
so having those processes in place, I think, are just extremely important. And I've met psychics who like don't have like systems in place, and it just kind of always baffles me. So I was just kind of curious,
yeah.
how it is that you work. Um, so when it comes to mediumship,
Yeah.
How did mediumship kind of, start coming on board for you? Was that like a very immediate thing, or did it take a bit of time, or how did that unfold for
Yeah.
you?
It was kind of immediate for me. So, like, even though I was doing those classes, this is a pretty common thing of like when you start opening up your abilities, everything starts happening. Like all the messages start coming through. So I was immediately picking up things from spirits that had passed. Like I kind of have an older home, and I was picking up a woman in my home, and that was like some of the first negative experiences that I was having. And then I think I was walking around like a thrift store with my husband, and just felt like a guy in there following me around. And that was like right when I started learning, and I didn't quite have all the boundary setting techniques. It was super scary. But once I learned the techniques of like how to, make sure that these types of spirits don't bother you, it was a pretty gradual process from there. Now it's at a point where like spirits pop up and I'm like, oh, cool. Okay, moving on. Yeah, I'm very desensitized to it now.
You're just used to it.
Yes.
Um, I have a friend, and we kind of got into this discussion pretty recently because I worked with an energy healer who kind of really focuses on clearing out energetic attachments and those sorts of
Mhm.
things. And a lot of that is beings and he was sharing with me how he doesn't believe that energy can get stuck. He doesn't
Mm.
believe that there are, people that can assist in taking energy back, across the veil or where, however it is you kind of want to see it, the rainbow bridge. I
Yeah,
guess
yeah.
some folks like to say, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that? Because I'm sure that you hear that probably relatively often, I would
Yeah.
assume.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely do, and I think that because there's a lot of people that practice like shamanic soul retrieval is a thing. And whenever somebody comes to me with something like that, I never am like, that doesn't exist. I'm always like, trust your gut. If it feels like it would work for you, go for it. Here's my opinions. And I always make sure to kind of like separate. Here's Lauren's bias, here's my opinions versus here's the psychic information that's coming through. But I personally don't feel like we can like lose bits of ourselves. It just a gut feeling. It's purely gut feeling of like it just doesn't feel correct. And so when people have energy attached to them, and I will pick up on that, it's usually like, how are you holding that in your field? How are you holding that? And so like example, if you're constantly on social media, me right now, with elections, I'm holding that energy with me and I'm allowing it to be in the space. And so somebody else might pick up on that, tuning into my energy. And so, like, another term for this might be psychic attacks. Like, I get a lot of people coming to me and they're like, I'm being psychically attacked. Somebody's attacking me. And I'm always like, okay, cool. Even if that's true, let's say it is, you have ultimate control over your bubble, your field, your boundaries. You get to decide what you keep. And so I'm always about like teaching that empowered action that sure, let's say worst case scenario happens. You can still get rid of it from here on out. Like you have ultimate control over your space, your energy.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
curious what you think about it.
Well, honestly, it was so interesting working with this woman because the way that she works is, I mean, she doesn't work in the Akashic records. And, I'm not someone who works with spirits and beings in this capacity. And so
Yeah.
it was very different for me. And major shifts definitely have happened after the session. But what was interesting to me is just that, the way that she talked to me about it, because she's she really like breaks things down for you. She basically
Uh-huh.
like tells you exactly what she's doing and why she's doing it and how things kind of work, which is sent me on like a tailspin in regards to like, oh my gosh, like I still need to go back and listen to the session because I want to get some questions out of there for the Akasha. I mean, like the
Gotcha.
way that the universe works, like, again, this is another question where it's like, we're never going to fully understand it.
Yes.
And I'm not someone who feels like I need to understand everything. Like, that's not me at all. But
Mm,
I am super curious about
yeah.
stuff, and I do like seeing things from different perspectives. And kind of the way that she was sharing it is like, really comes down to how clear we are in
Mm,
our words and in how we communicate. And like one of the curses, let's say, that she removed from me, and she has
Uh-huh.
a very technical way of like, yeah, defining a curse, which is not
Yeah.
your stereotypical like ooh scary type of thing. Um, it's really just about intention, right? And having
Yes. Yeah.
power and like one other thing, I can't remember what it is, but basically this curse was actually, it was started 7 generations back on my mother's side of the family. And it was really meant to just like be like a, protection. So like
Mm,
anyone who stepped out of the norm, it was like she wanted her children to make sure that they were protected, that they
mm,
weren't stepping outside of that norm. And so it was like this sort of invisibility cloak that was put on us, basically, which really
yeah.
helped me to understand why it was that like I've been ostracized from my mother's side of the family, especially since I've stepped into this work.
Mm,
And also just like some of the ways in which it's been difficult for me to connect through my work. It
yeah.
just blew my mind. But to me, that makes a lot of sense. I
Yeah.
guess I don't see it as like little parts of us per se being stuck,
Yeah.
more so that just like we're so massive as souls and we're living so many lifetimes at one time that things, like can get out of place. Again,
Yes.
I don't fully, this is not like my realm.
Yeah.
I haven't spent time again. Like I want to
Yeah.
go nerd out about it in the Akasha, but I was so curious about your perspective.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, I think your experience is totally valid. And I think, maybe we don't understand exactly where it's from or why it got there, but ultimately it's more so about what are you going to do with it now. And I think that's where like some of these tools and the things you're teaching, it's like that's where it can help people move forward instead of focusing on the past, right?
Yeah. Well, it was so crazy because we kind of just got off on this little side discussion at the beginning of the session where it was like, she was like, I said something about highest and best, and she was like, I don't really like working with highest and best. And I was
Huh.
like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So why? And then she started like breaking it down and she was like, okay, but let's talk about what highest and best is. So is
Yeah.
it like highest and best for this incarnation? Is it highest and best for this moment? Is it highest and best for the situation? Is it, and like it was sort of a teaching throughout this session in regards to how powerful our
Mm.
words are, you
Yeah.
know? And again, kind of going back to this like hand quotation curse, like it literally was just like, I intend for my children to be safe and to not be seen,
Mm.
versus like, and so our words get like, when we say something that we're not going to do, or we say whatever, like words are spells. It just blew
Yeah.
my mind. It just kind
Yes.
of, like I said, sent me down this whole tailspin.
Yeah.
Um, so in regards to like mediumship for you, like how naturally is it for you to be working with loved ones who've passed on or people on the other side?
That's a good question. I would have answered that differently a few years ago, but I've noticed that like there's moments because I've been doing this now for 10 years and it's like there's moments where I just am not connected and I'm like I don't want to talk to dead people. I don't care. And I'm just not in the mood right now. And I'll still do it and I'll still show up and I use the tools and techniques and it still works. But I feel like when it's strong is like when I'm excited about it, when I'm feeling very motivated, when I'm feeling very connected. And I've definitely been feeling that way this year. And so I feel like how natural it is also mirrors like how motivated and excited you are to kind of do it.
Mm,
So, but overall, I still love doing it because I feel like I just kind of like squashed like a big fear that I had as a kid, like fear of death. Like, don't get me wrong, still terrified of that, but fear of like, where do we go? And what happens to my family members? And there's just so much comfort that I get from reading other people to remind myself, that my family members in spirit, and they're giving me chills right now. They're like, yeah, we're here. Um, they're, they're it's a reminder that they're still there and I will still see them because I can connect and tune into everybody else, and their family members. So I got distracted because now they're talking to me. Sorry.
no, you're fine.
Uh,
So you're going to be coming into the Soul Driven Collective and teaching a workshop, a master class on the
yes.
clairs. And I'd
Mhm.
love to know just like, what are your strongest clairs? Like, how do you
Mm.
experience, your intuitive senses?
Yeah, like right now, my strongest clair is clairaudience, so I hear. And so that is like auditory hearing, like all the time I'm hearing doors close in my house and they're not actually closing. Um, but it can be like physical auditory hearing as well. And that's a whole rabbit hole to get down. But it's also like thoughts coming in that are not mine. And it takes a while to really know that difference of like, is this me? Is this Lauren's inner voice? Or is this like spirit coming in? And so I'm mostly clairaudient, but I'm also clairvoyant. And so I kind of get a mix of those, but it changes. Like I always say for everyone, it fluctuates. Like I started out being like violently clairvoyant and clairsentient, which is feeling and seeing, and I did not like it. And so I shut it down. And I always tell people, if you don't like it, you can turn it off and you can say, no, 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 use my other clairs. And so just know that you're not stuck to the ones you have if you don't like it. But that's kind of where I'm at. I see and I hear.
I love that. In regards to, I mean, I hear from my clients a lot, certainly people within the spiritual community talking about how like they can't use, whatever, like they'll feel blocked with one sense in particular, and like they really want to use it. Like, what's your advice to folks when they think that?
And that's been something I've been diving into with my Patreon community because there's a lot of people that have like aphantasia. They literally can't see things in their mind. And I always say try another clair. But there's techniques, there's things that you can do to get around it and to strengthen it. And even people with aphantasia have proven, that when they try and they put in the work, especially around dream work and just visualization in general, they actually do start to see things and experience things. So it's kind of this long game of endurance and like longevity and practice. And that's something I say about the psychic ability. It's always about practice. Like you don't expect to go in overnight and just learn this ability and come out like a super psychic woman the next day or man, whatever gender you are. I think that it's something that you have to work at and it continues to grow.
Yeah. What do you think the role that like self-worth, self-love, and value play in regards to people being able to, really connect with their psychic selves,
Yeah.
their gifts?
I think it's everything. Like truly. I think that when you are blocked and I talk about psychic blocks and removing psychic blocks, it's really just like what self-limiting beliefs do you have that's not allowing you to let this ability work. And self-worth or just not believing that you can do it or not believing that the psychic ability works that's enough to shut it off. That's enough for it to never work. And I think that's why so many people go around living their lives without their intuition on, is because they just don't think they can. And then it's crazy how when you start to tell people, oh, actually you are psychic, you are intuitive, how like magically it all starts to happen. So I think it's everything. If you don't believe you can, it's not going to work. I always say like belief is like 90% of the psychic ability. 10% of it is the techniques and skills and the work that you got to do around it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm fully on board with that. I don't believe that we can be blocked, outside of like our own self. Like I don't
Yes.
believe like someone else can block us or,
Yeah.
like sometimes I have people tell me like, "Oh, so and so got into my Akashic records and blocked me in this way." And I'm like, "So first of all, they can't do that, and second of all, it's not a thing."
Yeah. I mean,
It's
that just goes back to what we were talking about. It's like, what energy do you hold? Sure, that person might have said that about you or what was possible, but you're holding on to it and it's become your belief now. And so that's why I agree. Almost everything can be whittled down to like what you're holding on to block yourself. Almost rarely is it external. Like, even if it's like that you're in a really noisy setting and you're like, oh, I can't read because it's too noisy in here, like to some extent, that's still kind of on you. I mean, gray area there, but hopefully you're following me.
No, I completely agree. I do. Because it's just kind of limiting ourselves in that
Yeah.
moment, And so when we live in ourself, we do like diminish, close whatever it is that's going on within us. Um, so when you say everyone is psychic, like, do you believe that like we have, stronger gifts than others? Like, how do you kind of view that sort of psychic capacity?
Yeah. I mean, I really see it like, sorry. I really see it as like a skill and I see it as a spectrum. And so like on one end of the spectrum, you're not very practiced at something. Like you have never gotten on a bike before. You're going to fall off that bike the first time you get on it. And then the more you practice, the better you get. And you might call yourself intuitive. And then the more you practice, you might call yourself psychic. I call myself psychic from day one. But I think that it's a spectrum. And the funny thing about it too is that like you can stop. You can stop using your ability and it starts to get worse. And you kind of fall off the bandwagon. And it's like, oh, okay, I have to remember how to do this. And you have to kind of like jump back on the bike and you're a little bit rusty and you kind of might have to like relearn things. And so I think some people are just naturally further along on that spectrum, but it really doesn't mean there's anybody that's like worse than or better than. It's just a matter of like how much have you been practicing and where are you at right now with it? Have you been practicing a lot? Have you not been, giving it much time or energy?
Fair enough. Fair enough. So when it comes to like the guides that you work with, do they fluctuate in regards to who shows up for you? Do you have
Mhm.
like the same guides? Like how do you experience that?
Yeah, I have a like my solid team that has been around pretty much since day one. Like I can probably think of like two or three guides that have been with me since I started tuning into them. But I've also added, as family members have passed. I do feel like some guides come in and help us for like a bit and then they're gone and they're, mission accomplished, done. I also feel like you can invite guides in as well. And so I've done that over the years of like, that one sounds cool. I really want to work with you. And so I do think it fluctuates also depending on like where you're at in life and what you need, what medicine you need, and what guide is there to help you.
Yeah. Yeah, there's endless amounts of guides out there, it seems
I
like.
know.
Every time I turn around, I feel like someone's talking about something new. So what was it that kind of led you to start teaching people how to
Mhm.
develop their psychic senses?
Yeah, I think several things. I mean, one, my documentary started to turn into more of like a how-to. And that's a lot of reason why the documentary did not work. Is I was like trying to teach people. I was like, why am I doing this? And then I think,
Virgo
well,
rising.
Virgo rising, yes. And I also coached at the Aspen program for the last year that it was around. And I loved coaching the other students as well. So I did that in person. Um, and then after that, it was okay, the Aspen's program is gone. And I have this knowledge base, and I'm online seeing people struggling, and I have this knowledge base. I should just share. And so it really came from wanting to fill a hole, filling a gap that I saw that would have been so helpful for me. And so it just kind of turned into that. I think I've always just been a teacher. Like that's how I process. That's just how I like gather information. And I do think it helps as well when you're teaching something, it keeps your skill practiced as well. So it was also kind of important for me to just make sure that I was always keeping myself accountable for, not falling by the wayside and, doing the work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've been like kind of redoing some videos for the Akashic course that's coming up, and
Mm.
it's always it's so cool to kind of like dive back into, all of the things that I used to spend so much time with in the earlier part of my days with the Akasha versus where I'm at now. Just
Yeah,
revisiting that information, like it's so valuable. I mean, you can't I feel like there's always going to be some sort of nugget in there for you when you are revisiting old information that's just going to be like, oh, like I missed
so
this the
true.
first time around, or you see it in a completely different aspect, several years down the road, and you're able to like take it deeper in that area. Like it's just so cool.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's just funny because I'm literally doing the same thing. My intro course that I filmed way, way back, I think in like 2017 or 2018, I was like, this needs an update. And I'm going back in all my notes and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I completely forgot about that. Wow, like epiphanies here and there.
Yeah, yeah, it's so much information. Um, so in regards to your work with folks, there's a lot of different ways in which people can reach out and connect with you.
Mhm.
You've got so many different offerings. You've also got a community, and then, you're teaching people. And so I'd love for you just to kind of share with us your different offerings,
Yeah.
and ways in
Yeah.
which folks can connect with you.
Yeah, I'm one on YouTube. That's where a lot of like my free resources are. So if you're like not sure if you want to work with me, tons of videos from many years ago. But then I also have courses. So I have like my basic level course, masterclass level course, animal communication, like lots of little add-ons here and there. But then I also do like a Patreon group, and that's where we like really get one-on-one practice. Like people ask me questions every month. I do a video about that. I do personal readings over there. We actually meet once a month to practice our psychic abilities. And we've been doing a lot of like circles lately as well. We've all been feeling called to like channel information that's coming through. But then I also have just tons of readings, private readings with me one-on-one, but I also do private coaching sessions. But I feel like I have so many things, podcast, all the socials. Like I just try to be everywhere so that people can find me wherever it like feels best for them.
Where would you suggest that people start since you're in so many different places?
Yeah, I would say YouTube. YouTube if you like videos, and then otherwise Instagram is probably where I'm most active.
Yeah. Yeah, your YouTube is definitely what I was turned on to like back in 2022. And that was, yeah, where I really got a chance to just kind of start getting to know you and getting to know your work. And so I think
Mm,
that's a great place for sure. Um, and the master class that you're going to be teaching
yes,
in the community.
I'm so excited.
So this is going to be a psychic class on the clairs, and I'd love for you to just kind of share with us, like what you're going to be
Yeah,
talking about. And it feels like it's going to be like a very engaging class, lots of
yeah.
practice, lots of fun.
Yeah, I think so. Like the plan is we're going to cover the basics. We're going to cover the introduction. So even if you're feeling like, I don't know if I can do this, I'm going to really like cover those bases, but then also take it into a more like intermediate level for those who are familiar with it. And we're going to talk a little bit theory, but mostly I want to give people time to practice. I want to give people time to like do little breakouts, practice reading each other, and I think we'll be there to kind of facilitate that. And I want people to get a taste of it and actually do it. Because that's what's most fun about the psychic ability, and that's where you grow, is by actually doing it. And I want people to have those same moments of like, oh my gosh, I just picked up on that. Those are my favorite. I love watching that happen with my groups. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. The first time that I taught an Akashic workshop, like it was just like the highest of high. Like I just didn't
Yeah.
sleep that night because I saw everyone accessing the records, and it was just like, this is just so cool.
It works.
See, you can do it too.
Yeah.
Wonderful, Lauryn. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us as we're kind of wrapping things up here?
Yeah. I mean, my biggest thing that I like to leave people with is just like where to start. And I would say that I do have like a start here playlist on my YouTube channel, but I always say like start with where you're drawn. Like if you love the Akashic Records, you can use that to hone your abilities. Like you can practice the clairs within going into the Akashic Records. But if you're really drawn to something else, just start researching it, start diving into it. And then, just know that the most important things that I always start with are like protection and boundaries and like just kind of all of that to make sure that you're safe, you're talking the right things. And so that's where I would start, if you're really serious about diving into this.
Perfect. Yeah. And I would imagine that you have like videos on protecting yourself energetically and those sorts of things.
Correct. Yeah. It's psychic or energetic boundaries, and then like how to remove blocks is kind of where I always encourage people to start.
Perfect. Yeah. I'm a massive proponent of energetic hygiene. Like I feel like
Yes.
it's more important than diet and exercise even.
Yes, absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Lauryn,
Of
and
course.
sharing. It's been a pleasure to have you, and I'm so excited for this month's masterclass.
Me too.
All right. Thanks, folks, for tuning in today, for being here with us and sharing your time. Be sure to share today's episode with anyone who might benefit from it. Come be a part of the Soul Driven Collective. It's free to join. All links will be in the bio in regards to that, but also in addition to how to connect with Lauryn. Thank you again so much for being here today. Don't
Thank you.
forget, when we invest in ourselves, the world benefits. Until next time.
Sorry, I totally interrupted you.
You're fine.